Welcome to Aurora Connects Season 3. Can you even believe it? Season 3. This is episode 1 for Thursday, February 4th, 2021, the Vietnamese American Experience. I'm Associate Artistic Director, Monique Williams, and as always, joined by Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Dawn, how are you doing?
Great. I am doing all right. I'm glad to be back making the show. I've missed it.
It's been
so
a
much.
long break. Yeah. We had our holiday vacation. We had our 2-week furlough, and we're back and gearing up for a lot of exciting work this spring. And it's really great to be back on the show and saying hi to everybody.
Absolutely. I'm going to remind folks that they can comment along on Facebook, in the YouTube as you're watching. And as always, you can still email us questions, comments, concerns at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org. We are also available in an audio podcast format on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, most likely wherever you're getting your podcasts from, you can find us there.
And I want to remind everybody that Aurora memberships are still available, and there's still lots of great stuff happening with our memberships. If you're not already a member, please go to auroratheater.org. Take a look at everything. You can still get access to the flats, the audio drama that we produced in the fall. And coming up, we have Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, directed by Monique Williams as an audio drama. It's going to be, it's an amazing cast. It's going to be a really powerful production. And as well as lots of other content through our membership program. So please go to our website, auroratheater.org, check that out. And while you're there, there is a donation button at the top right. If you'd like to help us make this season happen and get us through until the point where we can make live theater again, that's how you can do it. Go to the website and click the donate button at the top right. Thank you so much.
And coming up on February 13th, we do have a reading. That is a member benefit for folks that already have a membership. You can watch the reading of Dustin Chin's Colonialism is Terrible, but PHO is Delicious. That's on February 13th. It's a 5 p.m. reading. And to kind of get us in the spirit of that, we have this show today with the focus on the Vietnamese American experience. So I'm going to jump in with our quote to help us launch today's discussion. Son, if you wanting to know about Vietnam, then I will tell you about Vietnam. If you wanting to know about Vietnamese people, then let me tell you about its people. But if you only wanting to know about war, then go rent a movie. That is from Viet Gone by Trieu Tran. Viet Gone was produced locally at ACT just a couple seasons back. They were all set to do Poor Yellow Rednecks, which is part 2 of that story, as was OSF this season. And those things, of course, were delayed due to COVID closure. So we hope when theaters reopen, we will all get to see Poor Yellow Rednecks as a continuation of that story. Viet Gone was a national hit and played in multiple regions throughout the country.
Thank you for that quote, Dawn. That was great. Well, shall we bring in our guests?
Let's introduce our guests, Josh.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I want to introduce you. We have Oanh Nguyen, who is a good friend of mine. Oanh founded the Chance Theater Repertory Company in Anaheim in 1999. You've been the artistic director ever since. I had a great time working for Oanh there. I directed a few shows back when I was living in LA, and Oanh is a brilliant director and a brilliant artistic director, and somebody who I really look up to and take as inspiration in my job. You've directed plays, you've won awards, you've served on boards and panels all over Southern California while building the Chance into an important regional theater. And you are directing our reading of Colonialism is Terrible, but PHO is Delicious as a co-production between Aurora Theater Company and the Chance. And I'm so excited that we're getting to do that. Welcome.
Me too. Thank you. Me too. I'm super excited about it and super excited about doing it with you guys. And it's so nice to reconnect with you, Josh. It's been such a long time, man.
Mm-hmm. We also have joining us Linda Do Nguyen, who has a master's in public administration and has worked in local government for years advocating for underserved and vulnerable populations. Linda, welcome. You are currently an equity, diversity, and inclusion professional at a utility agency, and you volunteer your time with various causes that include sustainability, mutual aid, and civic engagement. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. Super excited for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Linda is also my longtime friend. And more specifically, she's my little sister in the sorority that we both joined in our time at Cal State Hayward. We went when it was called Hayward. It's now Cal State East Bay.
Yes. Thanks for noting that.
And we have Trieu Tran. Welcome, Trieu. Trieu is a stage, screen, and television actor, born in Vietnam, immigrated to Canada, raised in Boston, Massachusetts. Series regular on Netflix's Altered Carbon, Monsterland on Hulu, and you have a solo play co-written by Robert Egan called Uncle Ho to Uncle Sam, which was at ACT Seattle, the Kirk Douglas in LA, and Playmakers Rep. Lots of, there's some great photos of Trieu doing his performances. Trieu, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Josh, Don. Known On for a while too, so I'm eager
yeah,
to
True's my long time. No.
We're all friends here.
Yes, we are.
So I just want to sort of open this up. You know, the topic of this episode is supposed to be the Vietnamese American experience. And I know, of course, there is no single Vietnamese American experience, but I'd love to ask, you know, what would you all like to share about your own experience as a Vietnamese American? Linda, do you want to jump in and share whatever that sparks in you?
Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you for asking and for inviting me here. I think that I think it is quite interesting. I think for a while, really, for me being Vietnamese American, I didn't really know that myself, what that really meant, and wasn't really sure if I kind of fitted into that whatever that identity is. And so I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I think that I'm kind of late to the game and trying to be more involved in the community and learn more about it. But I think, again, I don't want to think of us as kind of like a monolith of just one identity, just like the quote said, right? Like, obviously, many of us are affected by the war and stuff like that. But I think there's so many different layers. And I even think of Viet Thanh Nguyen's word in terms of like, I think the word was narrative plenitude and seeing ourselves in like so many different kind of aspects and identity. And so, the more that I learn in terms of not just, theater and books and whatnot, I'm always super impressed and just really excited to kind of learn more about my culture. And so I'm super excited to kind of be on this panel. I'm also embarrassed not to know too much in terms of some of the plays out there, but I'm reading a lot of books and whatnot. And so I'm just really excited to kind of absorb as much as I can. I'm trying to be more, I guess, civically engaged more so in the kind of local community. So that's my part. I'm just a lonely kind of civilian, not really an artist by nature like Oanh and Trieu is. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and On, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I mean, I came over here in '75 as part of the evacuation, right? So as a very young, like I think 3 or 4, 3. And so, yeah, I feel like I came over a very specific time. And when I think about that quote, I spent a lot of times around the dinner table with my parents, just trying to ask them questions of what was it like before the war. And it's true that the war is something that they don't feel really comfortable talking about, right? But I see the other side of that quote too. I do want to know about the war because I feel like when I watch a movie, that the war is not from the point of view of their experience. It's very much when I look at if I was to go watch a movie, I'm going to see the war from a very American point of view. So I see both sides of that for sure. Definitely experience my parents not wanting to talk about it, but definitely that experience of Kui of like wanting to know. Is that okay?
Yeah. I think it's okay. Yeah.
Did I break something? I feel like I broke something.
Trieu, do you
No,
have
not
any
at
thoughts
all.
you want to share just to start us off here with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a refugee. My family left Vietnam via boat in the early 80s. Did the whole refugee camp and ended up in Canada and then finally the United States. And just through my whole life and even now as an adult, I'm still trying to struggle with that sort of label, what does it mean to be a Vietnamese American? And at times I don't know, and at times I don't know what it means to be an American. Just coming here as a young kid, fleeing my country, like An was saying, was what you see on the movies and the TV, and the older generation don't want to talk about the war. But even as a kid, I'm like, why do we have to leave our country? Why is Vietnam so bad? Why is it depicted as evil people in black pajamas and AK-47? Is there a culture behind it? So I've always wanted to know, more. And as obviously now as I got older, I'm learning more that there's more to Vietnam than the Vietnam War.
What do you wish you had known? What's something you wish you had known as a child that you've learned as an adult that sort of helped you understand your identity?
I think that Vietnam is a beautiful country, and it is is a country full of culture and history. So that I think it would help me kind of assimilate a little bit better. I think I'd spent so much coming to America and having to assimilate, where in the house, my parents are trying the best they can, not only to put food on the table, but to, instill the culture. And then when you leave the house, it's, I got to deal with learning a new language, learning the American culture, and also having to deal with racism, just the journey of coming to a land that's supposed to be free and fair, and immediately you're told that you're different and that you don't belong here and that you need to go back to your country. And in that country, it's like, well, those are evil people and we left there for a reason, but what is the reason? So I'm just still up, thank goodness for theater. I can find some sort of like safe haven and community there where I can process and find moments and with projects and roles and meeting other artists to sort of having some sort of catharsis and understanding about what my identity and what's mean to be like human, as opposed to just being like marginalized and different.
You were talking a little bit before we went live with this about a role that you've been cast in where you felt like finally you were getting to play a Vietnamese American character specifically that had more complexity and maybe more depth than is usual. Do you want to? Has that been an issue in your acting career, trying to find those roles that allow you to that full expression of your identity?
Yeah, I think just it's. We're talking about opportunity, and I think like, any artist of color can relate. The opportunities are not there for us, the roles are not written. And, specifically for Asian American and Vietnamese American, those opportunities are far in between. And, when I first started out, the majority of the roles that, we were all the Asian Americans were in the room, auditioning for were at times very stereotypical. And if it wasn't stereotypical, they would ask you to do again and make it stereotypical. Like I used to go into the rooms and audition, and they would laugh. It's a comedic scene, and they would laugh, and then you finish the scene, you feel good, and then you hear a little whisper, and then they ask you to do it again, but in an Asian accent. And it's like in your head, you're like, what Asian accent do you want me to do? There's a lot of different.
There's only one, Trieu.
I've been doing that one Asian accent.
Yeah, and I think it's from Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? It's that one.
Right.
I'm teaching right now a race and performance class. And my students and I, we just did a soft investigation of, yellow face and whitewashing. And I showed them some clips actually from the Bruce Lee documentary, Be Like Water. So they saw that little clip from Breakfast at Tiffany's. But something that came up, because a fair number of my students are actually Asian American, is this myth of the model minority. And I wonder, how you all have been impacted by this sort of stereotypical myth of the model minority, if that was a real thing for you in your childhood, if you've been able to kind of like transcend that, or if it was something you felt you had to adopt in your youth. Linda, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I think that that is raised a lot, the model minority myth. And, you know, that some people think that, oh, you know, there's some quote, good stereotypes to that, but I don't think there's ever really a good stereotype, because that really does, you know, our community a disservice, right? Like if we are held towards a certain standard, and just thinking about being, you know, a young professional woman of color, you know, sometimes I'm not really taken seriously, you know, whether it's in the work or the professional life. And I always have to kind of vocalize and, you know, sometimes be interrupted. And so, or just that, you know, you're like a quiet, dismissive, you know, Asian woman that, you know, you shouldn't be talking about certain subject matters. And even to this day, you know, sometimes, you know, my parents don't take me seriously and treat me like a kid. And so I think that, you know, all those quote good stereotypes, whether or not they're well-intentioned, I think really do a disservice to our community, especially even thinking about kind of the taboos of like mental health, right? I think that, you know, our community for the most part kind of really throws themselves in kind of religion. And I think that's also a struggle when we think about kind of intergenerational kind of trauma and the war, and not really seeking, you know, the help that we need because we're held towards a certain standard, and we can't kind of talk about certain things and be really open. And so, you know, I think that what's really nice is the more and more I see kind of younger generations be a little bit more open-minded and kind of just like blow things up, it makes me really excited. I know it can be kind of difficult sometimes for the older generation to embrace new things. But yeah, I think that we all really are affected in a negative way when we think about the model minority myth in general. Thank you.
It's about all those, it's about those expectations, right? And having to deal with those expectations. And then of course, if you laugh too loud or say weird things, you know, say something that seems off color, then it seems like there's something wrong with you, right? I was always had to be careful of. I feel like in most of my circles, I tend to just speak up right away so that they know it's not the that I'm not going to live up to their expectations, and you know, and tell a stupid joke right away so they don't ask me math questions. You know, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, I don't. It's really hard to say how it affects you. But what you do know is you walk in the room and you know there's an expectation, and so you're already in a position of like, how do I manage these expectations? Like how am I going to find my way through this before we can connect as human beings?
What are some of, oh, go ahead.
I thought it was, you know, it's yeah, that pressure that you're expected. I remember where my friends used to be like, oh, my parents would give me $20 if I make the honor roll, you know, and I'm just like, if I don't make the honor roll, my dad will whoop my ass. So yeah, I just have to study hard, you know. There's no Asian bright gene in my. I'm like not the brightest guy in the room.
Yeah, so Trieu's just trying to let you all know we just get beat a lot. But it's true. I mean, it was hard. So it's like in one instance, you're being at home. It's you know, like the expectations are high and you're struggling to meet them. And then in public, you're just assumed that you would meet them. So it's like completely dismissing, you know, what our experience is, or at least what my experience is, right? Dealing with both sides of that expectation.
Josh, it looked like you were on the edge of a question.
Oh, I was going to ask our next question on our list here, which is what are the important issues facing the Vietnamese American community right now? And maybe that's another one that's sort of more general than is really useful. I mean, maybe, I mean, do you feel like you are, maybe the first question really is, do you feel like you are, that there is a Vietnamese American community that you are a part of that is facing issues in a particular way, or is it more complicated than that?
I feel like our community hasn't been very centered in this country and in sort of the larger conversation, even during everything that's been going on during the Black Lives Matter movement, everything else. I don't really feel like the Vietnamese experience has been centered in any way. So it's hard. I think I feel like as I'm usually told that this experience is not important right now. There's these other experiences that are far more important. So it's hard for me. I don't know. I mean, Linda, this is what you do, but it's hard for me to, I tend to find myself just kind of like stepping back, right? Like we could talk about all kinds of, but especially even in the theater world, like we live in, I mean, in the theater world, Miss Saigon didn't use Vietnamese language in the musical until 2017. Like internationally, like in 2016, they were still using gibberish. And it feels like that shouldn't have been okay in 2016, right? Like, but I feel like it's sort of an example of how often, and there's Vietnamese people working in those productions, right? How often we're just, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but like how often I feel like, I know you have issues, but there are other issues that are more important. So I don't know. Mine personally would be just connecting with my parents and trying to get some answers to those questions, because we're of that generation now about where the people who experience that war are slowly not going to be around to tell us. And I'm hoping that we're at that time where they're far enough away that they're starting, like my parents are starting to answer the question, even if it's only for like 20 minutes before they change the subject to why am I not eating more, but I'm really just hoping that I get some of those experiences and some of those stories before it's too late.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. I think that, for myself, I still can't really have those hard discussions with my family. And so I've kind of seeked some of that information, from organizations that I've been following via, social media and whatnot. I've been following a number of them for years, but, this year I finally was like, let me do something and join them and maybe volunteer. And so some of the organizations like Pivot, which is a progressive Vietnamese American organization, which they do a lot of civic engagement. And so, they look at really trying to, engage, the Vietnamese American community in terms of politics and making sure that, we are kind of represented in the various ways. I think that for a while, I thought I was a little bit too, quote, liberal or progressive for a Vietnamese American. And so, seeing other people kind of similar to me, it actually gave me more thought in terms of like, oh, maybe, I do kind of belong. And so I think this year during the election, I know Pivot, I think, started actually soon after the Trump administration started. And so, I think their call was really to kind of oust him, right? And so, I worked with their election campaign. I thought it was really interesting. They're very, very motivated organization, all volunteer based. And so, they were working with all over the state. And I think understood that not only is misinformation kind of a huge issue, in the English language, but in other languages like Vietnamese, it's even bigger. And so, this was the first year I talked about politics with my mom, and it wasn't easy, but I think the more and more I engage with her and that she trusts me, then I can kind of let her know of some more credible news sources to kind of read. And so I think that has actually made me a lot more, think of it in a positive way, thinking that, you know, there's nothing that we can do, right? Like I see a lot of young people actually trying to do something and really kind of produce really great, credible information. Like Vit Fact Check is actually a project of Pivot where, you know, they were actually, you know, looking at all the myths and kind of trying to decipher, you know, what is true and what is false. The Interpreter is also a really great organization that actually interprets a lot of great news. And then they even started, I know a lot of older Vietnamese people kind of more so look at like YouTube videos, like my mom. And so she doesn't read too much. And so there's also not a lot of media. And so I think the Interpreter actually started one called Kom Nai, Kom Beek. And so they started talking about really serious stuff, like even Black Lives Matter and what that is, right? And so, and it's like all these really great young people all over the country kind of volunteering and doing this research and kind of talking about these really hard topics. And so, you know, I'm having to sit down with my mom and like watch it and say, like, what do you think? And kind of go from there. And so, you know, I think that, I think the misinformation is really big. Obviously, that's kind of really, really made it hard for families to kind of talk about politics for the most part. Even misinformation about the pandemic too, right? Like, I think for the most part, a lot of conservative Vietnamese are sometimes like one topic people where they think like, as long as they're, you know, strong on China and anti-communism, that's all we care about. But, you know, I think there's so many more layers to that that we're kind of trying to figure out. And so I think that we're responding to that. But I think there's so much more work to do as well. So
that's why we're grateful for people like Trieu Tran, you know, because she was really working hard in that. And then also when she was writing for American Theater Magazine, right? Like I so miss her voice there. But she was doing such important heroic work for the elections, and I think that you know it's nice to know that those people are out there doing the real work, doing the important work.
I'm just having like my own little moment over here because I remember seeing Viet Gone and feeling like it was such a revelation for me, because I had only ever heard one side of the story around Vietnam, which is a very kind of anti-war liberal American stance. And then to hear you all also speak about how something that really is happening in the Vietnamese community is this intergenerational thing and the sort of silence from an older generation around the war and the trauma of the war. And so to kind of see how the work Quy is doing is the work that many of the folks in our generation are doing and trying to get their parents to or grandparents to open up, to share more of the experience so that those can kind of go on record. I love on that you named Miss Saigon. The first time I saw Miss Saigon, I was a young teenager. I loved it, right? Like a big helicopter comes crashing in. I didn't know to be critical of it. And then I've just, you know, I saw the tour twice. And again, Viet Gone was the only like the second time aside from Miss Saigon that I saw a representation, good, bad, or otherwise, of Vietnamese characters at all. And, you know, we're gonna do a PHO here in a couple weeks. And I wonder if there are narratives that you would recommend. Are there shows? Are there YouTubes? Are there novels? Is there a poet that would help those of us like me who haven't really had a lot of exposure to positive Vietnamese characters or narratives that exist out there that you find affirming?
You jump in before you answer and just say we have a question from the chat as well about who are up and coming Vietnamese playwrights or ones we may have missed that you'd like to see get some attention, which sort of dovetails into that.
Who are the up and coming Vietnamese playwrights? I think we all know Quy now, so he's good. As his like newest Disney film is about to air. So yeah, I don't have an answer for you.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I apologize.
No apologies necessary, right? That's the work of all of us. Yeah.
I know there's a
That's too much.
Vietnamese theater. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please tell us tell us about the company.
There's a Vietnamese theater company based out of New York called the Song Collective. And they're creating a program. They're generating new work for Vietnamese American playwrights. So they're just creating. I think there's. I mean, I personally don't know offhand besides Kui, but you know, it's about opportunity, and I think that if the opportunities happens, you know, you're going to see that there are a lot of Vietnamese American playwrights out there. That's just that we just haven't heard about them because they're not given the platform.
Which perhaps is a good segue to actually talking about pho and perhaps the idea of cultural appropriation. So Dustin wrote pho in response to an article that came out. The full title of the play is "Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious." I call it pho as a shorthand. But the article was about like the appropriate or proper way to eat pho, and of course the article's written by a white American, and it started a sort of contested back and forth about what even is a traditional pho and how do you season it and spice it and what do you add, and Dustin was inspired to write this play. However, Dustin is of Chinese ancestry, not Vietnamese ancestry. So it kind of puts a whole conversation out there in how does somebody write with cultural authenticity? Is there a right way to eat pho? How have you experienced Vietnamese culture beyond food being sort of appropriated or mainstreamed? And is that a good thing for the culture? Is that a bad thing for the culture? Do you all have any thoughts in that sort of umbrella topic?
Well, I'm grateful that he wrote this play because I feel like it's again one of the very few plays where the Vietnamese characters and their sort of point of view is being centered, right? So I think I'm appreciative that he did, because I would have to say, like, when we go back to Miss Saigon, I never felt connected to that musical, even though I think some of the music's actually quite beautiful, because I just never saw myself in any of those characters because of the way the story was being told and the sort of the point of view of that story. I don't feel like when I think about that story, whether the Vietnamese community in that story is being really dug into as far as human beings, as much as they're just sort of symbols. I feel like I've grown up in American theater really understanding humanity and empathizing, looking through the eyes of people who don't look like me, right? So I definitely feel like that has been my exercise, is to understand empathy through the eyes of people who don't look like me. So when you bring Kui in with Viet Gone, which is such an incredible play, which I was actually contracted to direct right before COVID happened. So hopefully that will happen someday. But to then get to this play and it to be not really about the war, which is also another thing that is new, right? For it to be centered around Vietnamese characters and not necessarily be about the war, although it's mentioned here and there, is I think another breath of fresh air, because it's not necessarily it's not necessarily your character and your humanity in relation to the Vietnam War.
And Trieu, you'll be participating in that reading. You'll be one of the actors in that reading. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on the play or what it means that the writer isn't Vietnamese?
Yeah, I really appreciate that the characters are the Vietnamese and they're at the center of the story. And like An was saying, that it's not, doesn't have to do with the war, and that's also refreshing. And I'm just excited there's a play about pho.
You know, since we're here, we're talking about, An, will you give us a little bit of a taste of what the play's about and how it works, the structure of it?
I don't know how much I want to give away, right? It takes
Okay.
place in, you tell me, it takes place in 3 different timelines, right? So like, and so the first timeline is in the 1800s, and you're dealing with a French aristocrat that's living in Vietnam at the time, um, um, and 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 who's in need of a chef, a new chef, and she's being introduced to a local woman who is, auditioning for the position, right? And needs the job. And then I think in the second part, we're like, I would believe 1999, which is, and we are at the time in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, where American businesses are starting to break in and are allowed to go in. And then the last part, the third part, takes place. I love it. Used to before COVID, it took place in present day because it takes place at a restaurant. The newest draft that Dustin just gave us, it says takes place in January 2020, which is very smart. And so, I mean, so you're kind of I don't know, as far as the fuzz, I guess you're kind of learning maybe where the history of the actual dish came from, right? And the French influence to pho in part one. In part two, you are learning, you're watching the discovery of like the American, as these two American food researchers are tasting pho for the first time. And then in part three, you are at a trendy, fancy restaurant in Brooklyn where a Caucasian chef, a white chef, is claiming to have made the perfect pho. Did I give too much away?
I think that's great.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah, it's such a delightful play. It's very funny and very sharp, and really, really smart, and just great characters. And the same four actors play different characters in each scene, so that's going to be fun as well. Just watch.
And it's everything Don said. It's definitely asking questions about appropriation, about exploitation, authenticity, power, right? What happens? Where does the power lie? Where does the authorship lie on something like this? It made me do so much more research, and I learned so much more about pho when I first, after reading the script. And every time I read it, I'm always hungry for pho afterwards. So that's got to be a good thing, right?
How do you eat your pho?
Oh, with everything. First, I literally just had it on Sunday. My mom just made it on Sunday. But yeah, with all the fixings, right? With all the fixings. But I love this idea in the play, or there's this idea in the play, and I think it's, this idea of like, and I have to stop and think about it. Do I taste the pho no matter where I'm at before I start adding the fixings? I'm not sure if I always do. There's just an assumption that it's going to need a little hoisin sauce. You know what I mean? It's going to need a little sriracha or a little chili or something, a little lime. See, aren't we all getting hungry now? Is there a lot of pho in the Bay Area?
Oh yeah.
Lots of pho in the Bay Area.
There's a Vietnamese restaurant right on the corner where we get a lot of banh mi sandwiches and pho. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Our director of marketing, pho is like her favorite, and she was even just in the chat earlier, like, I just had pho 2 days ago. She loves the pho, and she could give you plenty of recommendations. And Linda, I know you're a foodie. I mean, you sent me a bunch of food links. Do you eat pho, Linda?
I do. I actually don't eat beef anymore, so I eat chicken pho, but I like and appreciate pho, but I feel like we have so many noodles that I also appreciate as well, even more. And so like I'm excited when I hear about the other noodles like hot tiu and bún bò Huế. Like there's so many amazing noodles. I'm such a noodle head that I feel like pho is like, is the only one that's ever talked about, that and banh mi, like those two meals, when we have like so many more other foods that makes me actually really excited as well. But yeah, I do enjoy chicken pho.
Has pho become the pad thai of the Vietnamese food?
Oh.
It's all right. I also really crave bun sale right now, so that's the other thing I'm
Mm.
thinking a lot about right now.
Mm.
I'm just monitoring the chat and noticing that that a viewer did comment that in the Latino community, they're experiencing a lot of the same misinformation going out to older generations and sort of having to translate sources around pandemic and politics. And I know that there's been, especially in Asian American communities, like sort of an uptick in racialized violence. Have you been experiencing that on a personal level? Maybe not. I hope not. But
I mean, I think we're
but I
aware
know
of
that
it,
there
right?
has
We're
been.
we're aware of it every time we find out, oh, so and so was just exercising in a park in LA, and then she gets, or whatever it is, right? Like we're aware of it, and I feel like the random experiences that I have had over the last year in public from people just screaming at me for no reason, right? Like, um, is that because of COVID and what's happening with sort of the anti-China, anti-Asian sentiment, or is that just what what I would have gotten in 2019 too? So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I feel like I've dealt with racism for so long that, it's like I'm not immune to it, but it's like, no longer that I just kind of avoid the looks or whatever. And, like, especially this year too, it's just like, is that person just being, doesn't like Asian in general, or because, it's 2020?
And I feel like I've just been kind of in a bubble working from home. So like, my cats and my boyfriend are kind of my coworkers. And so I feel like, honestly, I don't leave the house very much, but I read the news and the stories so much. And it really disheartens me that it affects so many people in our community, especially the businesses that are like hurting immensely. And so, yeah, I think that's so unfortunate, and definitely not something that we should, take lightly, for sure.
An intersection around a lot of things happening too, right? I think unfortunately there is that uptick in racialized violence towards Asians, but also an acknowledgement that there is racism towards Asians that maybe we weren't naming because of the model minority myth, outside of obvious gross characters, like in Breakfast at Tiffany's or something. I think people maybe have forgotten that there's like day-to-day racism that people in Asian American communities face. And not only is not Vietnamese a monolith, but certainly Asian is not monolithic, right? Like there's so many Asian identities. And to just be sort of grouped together is already does such a disservice. But to see then that in like Latino communities, there's similar things happening around misinformation. And to hear you say, Linda, that some of these YouTube programs, they're even talking about Black Lives Matters in news outlets that are geared towards other ethnicities, and really sort of looking at how marginalized communities are being affected the same and different, and where those intersections are. And I hate on the idea that because Black Lives Matters, Asian lives matter less. I hate that there's any dichotomy or that would ever be presented in that way, because I think we have to really amplify all voices of marginalized people for sure. Um, and so I'm excited that we're doing as a small, very small gesture to even move in that direction. Um, Aurora is guilty of having not done very many Asian authored plays, um, and hardly any Asian directed plays. So this is a great opportunity for us to get better at representation.
I think that's what we're all right now wrestling with, right, is how do we do better, and how do we do what we do in a way that's safer for everyone and for all. And I think we're all wrestling with that. Um, which is, it's interesting that we have this time really, right, while we're sort of trying to figure out how to survive COVID too, to be thinking about those things. But these are important conversations. I literally just finished a project with our local university, Chapman University, where I was hired originally to direct Glass Menagerie, right? And then George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement happened, and the students stood up and said, maybe we don't need another production of Glass Menagerie right now. And so they checked back in with me, and we ended up with working with 18 students and doing a 2-hour devise play, like about 30 pieces from the students on their kind of how they're reacting to the changing world around them. So it's I think we're all more aware now that maybe all our spaces were not as welcoming and as safe as we had originally maybe thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to sort of wind it back to an opening sentiment Trieu had, yay for the theater as a place where a group of students can say, hey, wait, and then you, along with this group of students, can create something new, original, a container for all their voices. So yay, theater. And as we wind near our time, so as not to end on too somber of a note, we love to sometimes just ask folks, what's bringing them joy this week, or what are they looking forward to in the days ahead?
Well, mine's super simple. We start rehearsal on the PHO play next week, and so I'm so excited to do that. And of course, this new draft that just happened with Dustin, I'm just trying to take it all in. He's done some really special work, and I'm just excited to get to hear it out loud with this cast and with your team. So I can't wait.
Are you Trieu? What are you finding joy in this week, or what are you looking forward to?
I'm just, like other artists, I'm so starved to create, and I'm so hungry for theater and just miss being in the room with other artists. So yeah, I'm grateful that you guys asked me to be on board, and just that's I'm just it's hey, I'm so excited to work on this play, and that has to do with PHO, and to work with On. So I feel grateful, and I'm excited. So thanks for having me.
You're so lucky to have you, Trieu.
What about you, Linda?
Well, I'm looking forward to hear more about the play for sure. It's making me very hungry. And in the spirit of, the Lunar New Year, even though we can't celebrate, in physical space, but I still look forward to maybe the online kind of virtual spaces because it's definitely my favorite, I would say, holiday overall, the Lunar New Year, all the festivities and whatnot, and just reflecting back at old pictures, but even just to do anything outdoors. I know that I think one of our art walks is like opening up tomorrow, and I'm like, wow, I get to go outside and leave my house and look at some art. And so I'm just looking forward to just leaving the house and doing something. And it's a nice, weather, of course.
I love that. Thank you all so much.
Of course, thank you for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to the reading. So if you'd like to enjoy the reading coming up of Colonialism is Terrible, but PHO is Delicious, you can become an Aurora Theater Company member by going to our website at auroratheater.org. The membership also gets you access to our audio dramas and more conversations like this, all sorts of stuff. So please do that. And while you're on our website, click the donate button at the top right and help us keep doing things like this and making wonderful art and help us make it through till we can make live theater in our space once again.
Great. Josh, who are we shouting out this week?
Oh, we are shouting out the Vietnamese American Community Center of the East Bay. For 20 years, more than 20 years, they've been a refuge and resource for low-income Southeast Asians and other underrepresented immigrant communities in the San Francisco Bay Area. They provide a variety of support services, including access to nutritional meals, senior programs, housing assistance, immigration, legal, and education services, English as a second language classes, and employment development. Their programs are designed to provide their clients and their families the support they need to become self-sufficient within a year after their arrival to the United States. VACCEB.net to check them out.
Great. I want to thank the folks that were participating in the chats today on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for sending in those comments. It helped keep our conversation going and very nutritious. And for folks that are a little bit shy and don't want to write in the chat, you can always email us at connects@auroratheater.org, connects@auroratheater.org. We love hearing from you. Your feedback helps us shape the show as we are solidly now into season 3, if you can dig it, of Aurora Connects.
Next time on Aurora Connects, not next week, it's in 2 weeks, right, Dawn?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, we're doing
On the
every other
18th.
week. So on the 18th, we will be discussing a big conversation that is happening in the Bay Area theater community right now around confronting and dismantling oppression in our theater community. It's a very hot topic. It's something that a lot of folks are spending a lot of time having really deep conversations about, and we're going to have some really wonderful guests to discuss that with us in 2 weeks. I hope you'll join us for that.
2 weeks, the 18th, 5 p.m. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for staying connected. Until then, bye, friends.